Hey, folks, welcome back to the Dennis Miller Show. Bill O'Reilly and I, speaking of runaway American dreams, will be in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, April 11th. For more information, go to DennisMillerRadio.com. Joining us now, a friend of show, a lovely fellow who's always been kind with his time to us, founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He is the author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Happy New Year, Doc.
Happy New Year. It's great to be with you, Dennis.
Let's see. What's happening? This, quite surprisingly to me, and granted I don't keep an eye on it like you do, but Egyptian President al-Sisi calls for a religious revolution, his words, not mine, in Islam that would displace violent jihad from the center of Muslim discourse. Did your jaw hit the ground, or did you think al-Sisi, and I'm not saying our president, that's al-Sisi. This is al-Sisi from Egypt. Were you surprised at his comments?
You know, I was surprised at how clear they were. You know, I'm not surprised that ultimately the dictator has taken on political Islam because, you know, right when he took over, even though Morsi or the Brotherhood had chosen him to lead the military, there's always this antagonism in Egypt for a long time between the secular dictators and the Islamist populist movement. But you'll see across the Middle East, Dennis, these monarchs and autocrats are realizing that this monster they've been feeding in the schools that they've funded and built is coming back to bite them in the you-know-what. And they are trying to stop it. And his language was pretty clear about the and he was talking to the clerics. He was speaking at the university there and telling them that, you know, ultimately this is a faith of 1.6 billion people can't be one that wants to kill the other 5 to 6 billion people, and we have to marginalize jihad. So he said all the right things. What was missing, though, was sort of what's the exit strategy for dictatorship. He didn't talk about the solution being liberty. He hasn't abandoned the Islamic State, so he didn't mention anything about the Islamic State. And the monarchs in the UAE, for example, also said that the Brotherhood and Islamism is bad, but they still believe in the Islamic State, but they just want them, the oligarchs, to control it and not the populist movements like we see in the Brotherhood or in Iran.
Well, the phrase jumps to mind, though, never look a gift Egyptian in the mouth, though. It's something, right? Some sort of candor and in relatively accessible language, right?
It's huge. It is huge because he said what we've been saying forever, and that ultimately the proof is going to be in the next few months to years as to how he implements that. Because Al-Azhar University, which he was speaking to, that disseminates most of the militancy and apostasy laws and blasphemy laws that empower the Islamists, are they going to begin to do this reform, or was this simply a one-off so he could curry favor domestically and globally? And I think ultimately there has to be a transition. Will it be sort of like the South African speeches against apartheid that ultimately led to the change there, or will it be simply just window dressing?
How was it received in the room? I'm surprised. It sounds like Sarah Palin at Berkeley or something. How did the clerics react, as you say?
I don't know. That's the million-dollar question. We're curious. There's the reformists are jubilant. The ones that we're in communication with are saying that maybe this guy will help us. But unfortunately, the end of dictatorship is also helping reformists too. So we're not sure where he's falling. But the clerics themselves, they've been silent, and I think it's because they realize that they really can't take him on. And I think in some ways we have to admit, while it's easy to sit in America and say these things, it will take a strong man in some ways to move things forward because the populist movements have been proven to be a failure. And the clerics are going to be silent because last June we saw, the Brotherhood was thrown out by a massive revolution and Revolution 2.0. So the clerics are treading lightly. The Islamist movements aren't ready to take on dictators like al-Sisi, and also the people themselves rejected the Islamists, so they're going to be quiet.
Well, nonetheless, I'm hoping al-Sisi has not hired his security from the same firm that Sadat did, because this is going to be incendiary in over certain kitchen tables over there, and I think I don't know. It just sounds like pragmatism and candor over there puts you in the crosshairs of the scope. We're talking to Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. You can follow Dr. Jasser, that's Jasser, on Twitter, at Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. I haven't talked to you since Hagel split the scene. What'd you make of Hagel? Does it matter? Is this on him, or is he merely a water carrier?
Well, I think, ultimately history is going to show that, I don't know what much he did. I was surprised that he fit into that administration, so his departure quickly within barely...
well, they need a body. They need a body to throw out the door.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. But, it's sad. I saw a piece that talked about how upset and depressed many of the military leadership are. And there's been a pushing out of many of the strong leaders in our military, and they're being sort of thrown to the side as they've been cleaned out of those that look for a strong America. And Secretary Hagel, I think, did not really see a tenure that kept our military strong, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we're a Hegel different from the philosophy of, what was his name, G.W. Hegel. Hegel felt that the rational alone is what's real. And it would seem to me that Hegel signed on with Obama to say that the irrational alone is real. So I think that's where they split as far as philosophies go. What do you make of this thing in Germany? Now, I know Merkel's the Hun has the worst track record in the history of the planet. Although, radical Islam is going to go by it at the speed of light eventually in my eyes. But certainly they can't let these things crop up because they tend to, shall we say, run with notions. And it hasn't worked out well for them. Merkel says, no, please don't join the anti-Islamic movement. But I think they've been holding some gatherings and not quite Nuremberg-esque at this point, but there's some people showing up, right?
Oh, they're having weekly demonstrations and, tens of thousands. And this movement, I mean, if there's anything, we have to wake up in the West because as we saw anytime, when we conservatives didn't have a solution to health care, the Tea Party woke up and moved the populists against it. And you're seeing the same thing with Islamism. Unfortunately, what that does is also it fills a vacuum. And what's happening is it's easy to say that, well, a lot of these movements are xenophobic and anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant, which they are, but they're not providing solutions. And the solution, even though on paper they say that they're not against all Islam and they're not against all Muslims, you'll see a lot of the language is not really helping foster Muslims like our group and others that we work with in Europe and here to feel that they can, stick their head out and be part of the solution. And unfortunately, while the leadership in Europe, including the German Chancellor and others, have been correctly exercising caution on what these the Pegida movements and others have been doing in their hyper-nationalism, she's not offering the same language as Prime Minister Cameron and others that have said, Islamism is the problem, but we have to solve that by bringing Muslims into the fold of secular nationalism, and this movement isn't doing that.
Pegida, that's the name of the furthest out there group?
Yeah, it's a patriotic European movement against the Islamization of their continent, and depending on where it is, last night's demonstrations were in Dresden, so they were saying Digida, and they have various different formulations of wherever it's propping up all over Europe. And in Sweden, there was a mosque that was firebombed a few days ago, and they also had some demonstrations. So these are all just simply, actions that are filling in a vacuum because there's been no leadership about what to do. Daniel Pipes said it best. He said, Prime Minister Blair said a lot of good things about Islamism, but yet never effectuated a strategy about how to counter it, and nothing's happened beyond the words. And these movements are simply filling in a vacuum of solutions.
Boy, it all seems to be, I don't know, do you believe it comes to a head in our time, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser? And by head, I don't, either the percolation pops and it begins to be more understanding between all the divergent people, or the bubble explodes and we have some sort of, worldwide acrimony Do you think it happens in our lifetime, I guess? I can't predict what's going to happen, but it certainly seems to be all percolating.
Oh, I think so. I think these fault lines between the West and Islamism are coming to a head and spreading more, and ultimately it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And the two stories we talked about, Egypt and the Pegida movement in Europe, are no different. It's the same problem. And unfortunately, we're getting past the denial now to the point of realizing we have a problem, and now we have to start to talk about what the solutions are, which no one's really doing.
Well, I do like the idea, Doc, as somebody who's followed sports his whole life. I kind of like and I make no claim to playing it. I was an inept athlete, but I always, from afar, sense that good locker rooms operate by strong leadership within the locker room. And I'd have to say, for me, if you said, well, what's the fix on all this? I would hope at some point that the sane supermajority inside Islam would start to tidy up and actively assist in eradicating the nuts within, man. Because we need the help from within. You know what I mean? It's like, I can't go in and fix a clubhouse. I can't go into that faith and fix it. I'm hoping the sane voices like you within figure out some plan to bring the nutters back into the fold, right?
There's no doubt, and that's why the response from Muslims to these movements like the Pegida movement should not be, oh, woe is us, they're Islamophobic and xenophobic. The response should be, we are going to fight the Islamic State. We are here as American nationalists, Egyptian nationalists, European nationalists, to stand behind our countries, with our countries, to fight the scourge of Islamic radicalism and Islamo-patriotism and jihad. That's what has to happen, and I think Sisi sort of missed that. He didn't talk about the need for Egyptian nationalism for all Egyptians and the need to end the Islamic State. And I think that's the way to counter that. And unfortunately, that is not being discussed because of political correctness.
Well, listen, I know you have the balls to do it. You tell me. Do the other 1.6 billion Muslims on the planet Earth have the balls to go against the bad guys?
The heat has to be up enough on us. My colleagues like my work, most of my Muslim co-religionists, but they say, we're pretty comfortable in America. And I think that's as much as I don't like the xenophobia of these movements in Europe, it's going to make Muslims wake up to, which side are we going to take? Are we going to do this as Germans, as Swedes, or are we going to do this as continue to be foreigners? And if they love their countries, they're going to have to push back against it. And unfortunately, we're giving Muslims a pass in America about their nationalism and about their belief in this type of system versus any form of the Islamic State. And until we stop giving my colleagues a pass, I don't think the heat's going to be up enough for them to really stick their necks out.
Although I would also caution any of my Muslim brothers out there, if you do convert to full-board Germany, keep an eye on yourself. Because they've got their own ticks. All right. Dr. Jasser, good to talk to you, baby.
Anytime.
All right. We'll talk at you down the road.